gentlemen, please welcome Senior Vice President and General Manager, Networking and Security, Martin Casado.
Good morning. Did you guys notice Carl's jacket yesterday? It's kind of hard to miss, huh? So I thought it'd be difficult to beat, so I'm actually going to go for kind of the best liner. How's that? All right. So the application has changed. For those of you now on Twitter, Sanjay, think about how many different components are required to get a transaction done. It's literally dozens of compute nodes, networking, L4 through 7 services, firewalls, load balancers, switches, and routers. And all of these have to work in tandem to create a result. You know, we've said for so long that the network is the computer. But I would like to turn that around and say, you know, the application has become a network. And I don't mean that in some marketing-y way. I mean, very concretely, it's become a distributed system. And that distribution, that complexity, underlies so much of the problems we see in IT today. So I know many of these problems are known to you, so I only want to highlight a few of them that I find to be particularly illustrative. Let's take, for example, the simple act of provisioning. I mean, provisioning the app is like the most basic requirement for IT. Yet, because of the complexity of the application today, this is like passing legislation, right? It requires a tremendous amount of configuration of a lot of components, communicating across silos. It's a very manual effort. It takes a lot of time, and it's very brittle. These are shared infrastructures that we're working on. So if you make a mistake, you may not only impact the application that you're working on, but many others. That brings us to the second challenge. Consider troubleshooting. 2 words, root canal. Honestly, infrastructure materializes through the lens of an application. You've got a user who has a problem, you get a call, and without end-to-end visibility, it's very difficult to know what's going on. But because of the distribution of components, it's hard to even know where to start looking. Finally, let's consider security. So I've been in security for a long time. The landscape is evolving so quickly. We've got new defenses, new threats, new best practices, and they come out all the time. And in order to keep pace, IT has to be able to adopt them. So if change is hard, you're dead. But because of the complexity of applications, once we deploy them, we don't want to touch them. It's like we're pausing the network. And as a result, over time, organizations become uncompliant, or worse, insecure. So the application has evolved into a network. And over the last couple of years, the infrastructure has evolved into a software layer, a major part of which is network virtualization, that accumulates all of the pieces together so that you can configure, secure, and troubleshoot the application as a whole. So in a moment, I'm going to talk about how that works, but first, let's hear it from a customer.
With a total of 42 owned or operated broadcast stations across the U.S., Tribune Media has become one of the nation's largest independent broadcasters. And as it continues to transform its content, service, and delivery, data center security has become priority 1.
I've lived the world as a CSO, Chief Security Officer. I've also been a CIO, and I've been a CTO. So there's not many things I've gotten excited about where I could have all 3 hats. When I saw NSX and I went to my team, everybody kind of had their different viewpoints. I'm like, you don't understand. This isn't a step. This is an evolutionary leap in capability around operations, around security. We needed a platform to absorb SaaS applications, and we needed to have a platform that would change the security geometry that there was today. The answer was pretty simple for us. It was VMware with the hypervisor and NSX. So we set up a pilot, we put NSX in, and the bell went off. We can do this. In 5 months, we moved 141 apps onto the infrastructure, and we had 9 help desk calls. So guess what? It works. With the NSX platform, I can move networks. I can move everything. So if I'm getting attacked, I'm just going to move it. So if I have something on my internal cloud and I want to move it to an external cloud, all of my security moves with it. And that's awesome. I'm here to help the business units, and I'm here to keep it secure. But you step back a little and you look at literally we've gone from the Flintstones to the Jetsons in less than 18 months.
Seriously, guys, I think that's so awesome. So David said, we've gone from the Flintstones to the Jetsons. Let's talk about how that happens. Okay, so what is network virtualization? It's very, very akin to compute virtualization. It's a non-disruptive software install that installs on the servers. It runs in the hypervisor. And it creates what you can think of as a network hypervisor that aggregates all components of an application so that you can do the troubling and the provisioning and the configuration through the lens of an application. So provisioning is a single-click process. Network virtualization virtualizes all services of a network, switching, routing, and L4 through 7 services. But the services are reimagined so they're fully distributed. So they're run in the kernel, they're fully distributed. So in some ways, they scale infinitely. I like to call them infinite services for that reason. So you can apply security throughout the data center. So you can provision each application with its own configuration, complex topologies with a single click. Let's talk about troubleshooting. So there's two advantages that SDDC network virtualization have in troubleshooting. The first one is, like I mentioned, you have all components of the application, so you can troubleshoot end to end. The second is, and I think this one's often lost, virtualization is necessarily at the hardware-software boundary. So it's like in this perfect position to do complex debugging of both. And over the last year, we've seen an evolution in the tools to take advantage of this power to offer very sophisticated troubleshooting. So you can start, for example, at a very high-level application view and drill all the way down to things like physical link failures in the network. And we'll be demonstrating this in a little bit. Now, yesterday, we announced NSX 6.2. It is actually the most feature-rich release we've ever done. There are many features that are released. I'm just going to touch on a few of them, but I encourage you to learn more about it here. Go do the hands-on labs. So there's a lot of work for multi-data center type stuff, so HA and DR, multi-VC, integration with top-of-rack switches, so hardware integration, provisioning of physical hardware, a lot of operational work. We even have a sneak preview of a distributed load balancer dropped all the way into the kernel. Now, NSX has been on the market for about 2 years now, and we've seen tremendous growth in that time. I mean, the last we announced, we had over 700 customers, hundreds in production. Just at this VMworld alone, I believe we have 25 customers doing sessions. And as you saw in the day one keynote, we had DirecTV talking about how NSX helped them with one of the largest pay-per-view events ever. So we're seeing a lot of traction. And as interesting as the amount of progress we're having is the fact that if you look across the customers, there's no adherence to a certain vertical. There's no adherence to a customer size. And this is just generally adopted. And I think the reason is because app complexity is a fundamental issue in IT, and it addresses that. At the same time, the partner ecosystem continues to grow. If on the technical side, if there's something available in the physical, we want it to run seamless in the virtual. And many of our partners, in addition, are also taking advantage of the platform to add new types of services that aren't even available in the physical data today. I think a good example of that is Palo Alto Networks. So let me take a moment to talk about the use cases that are driving adoption. So it turns out across most of our customers, there's 3 primary drivers. Security. Again, we have infinite services, so you can apply security policy to every flow, every packet in the data center. Automation. The ability to automate provisioning and configuration to reduce operational times to 0. And application continuity, which is kind of a fancy way for saying doing HA and DR across data centers. So we have actually a customer that uses all 3 of them to drive their business. This is Global Speech Networks. They're one of the largest call center clouds in Australia and New Zealand, so we can hear from them.
The benefits of server virtualization have been huge for us.
Now with VMware NSX, it allows us to accelerate that deployment because there's no longer a requirement to do a lot of physical configuration. We template a very complex tenant environment, and then we can scale that again and again and again.
So today when customers come to us and they want a custom solution that integrates deeply into their network, instead of having to buy physical equipment and integrated that into our environment, today we rolled that out with a templated approach from VMware NSX, driving down the total cost of ownership for our end customers, providing greater flexibility to them, providing greater security to them, and ultimately differentiating ourselves in the market so that we can win more business.
VMware NSX and F5's advanced load balancing allowed us to provide a highly available and resilient solution to the front end of our network so that when our customers connect to us, we can ensure that there's zero downtime in the event that there's a disaster.
Today we do that across 2 data centres within Australia. Within the coming months we will have that available across data centres in New Zealand as well, providing an active solution across both countries. I think if we look 10 years from now and we look backwards, network virtualisation will be seen as just an ordinary way of doing business and something that is readily adopted.
All right, great. So GSN has integrated NSX in their day-to-day IT operations, as have many of our customers. Operations has been a big focus of ours over the last year because so many customers are going into production. So we want to give you a glimpse at what that looks like. And to help me do that, I've got Jacob Rack on stage. Jacob, thanks for being here. So go ahead and roll the demo. All right, so Jacob is a network operator, and you're operating on kind of what looks like a creepy sea creature.
Yeah, this creepy sea creature is actually our dev cloud. And this is where we deploy thousands of applications using our in-house tool, and they're kind of spun up and down constantly.
That's right, so we've got a dev cloud, multiple applications, different topologies. Now, I've mentioned before that traditionally it's difficult to deploy and configure apps, but with SDDC it's much easier. So maybe go ahead and step through that process.
Sure, so on the left we have a set of templates. So let's dive into our 3-tier app. This is our kind of a classical 3-tier application, web, app, and database. On the right we have some predefined security policies that are applied uniquely per the different tiers. On the web tier, we also have that distributed load balancer you talked about. And on the database tier, we actually have physical and virtual assets that we're extending security and the logical networking to.
Great, so I'm glad in this example we do have physical workloads. Like many of our customers have physical workloads that they want to extend NSX control over for provisioning and managing the security. So it's good we demonstrate that. So let's go ahead and provision this.
All right, we just have to click deploy and we're all set.
All right, great. So now our dev cloud has a new application that's running. So let's assume a user is using this, a problem happens, you get a phone call. Basically, the only information you know, the application isn't working. How would you then go ahead and debug it?
Sure, we can switch over to our VMworld as Operation Manager, where we have a custom dashboard with all the applications. The one in orange is actually one of the applications that's experiencing a problem. So as we click in that application, we can see that full kind of 3-tier topology that we saw with our deployment tool.
And to be very clear, this includes compute, networking, and storage, all aspects of the application, correct?
Yeah, all aspects. So if we take a look at this 3-tier, we can actually see that the web tier is having a problem. Click on that web VM that's experiencing a problem, and we can scroll down to see what could be the problem in all the networking components that VM is connected to.
Right, so this is a networking talk. Clearly the problem is going to be in the network. So here you've got both the logical view and the physical view, and I believe this is actually a Cisco topology. This is a link level topology?
Yeah, we actually have a Cisco Nexus spine leaf topology here with the spine and the leaf top of rack switches. But on the left, we can actually take a look at all the NSX components that are in this topology, and they're all green. They all appear to be functioning correctly. But on the right, we have a problem with one of our top of rack switches. So we can drill down and see and we can see that that's actually causing some packet loss. So we drilled down from the VM all the way down to packet loss on the top of rack switch.
All right, perfect. So from an application level view, we're able to drill all the way down. We find the physical link, we fix it, everything's fine.
Yep.
Then let's say you get a phone call the next day, it's your security guy. He says, you know, we're probably not compliant, but if we put in a Palo Alto Networks next generation firewall in, we will be. How would you go ahead and do that?
Sure, so that's actually really easy. We can hop back in our deployment tool and refresh our security groups to pick up that change. And we refresh, we see that next-gen firewall tool that we need to apply to our web tier. We drag it over and republish those changes, and we're all done.
Great. Super, thanks so much, Jacob. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and give it up for Jacob. So, I know we don't have a lot of time to show a lot of the features, so I really do encourage you to go out and see them. So this grainy iPhone photo I actually took this weekend out of my window of my kitchen. And the reason I wanted to show it is because, you know, just like you can see a glimpse of the bridge, you know there's so much more to be uncovered. And that's the same with network virtualization. I mean, if you think about compute virtualization, early on during the adoption, the use cases were very simple, powerful, but simple. But after that, after adoption, after understanding, it captured the imagination, and things like vMotion and cloud were ushered in. And we're at the stage with network virtualization that now the platform has been adopted, that we can drive a lot of very fundamental changes and new services on top that change the paradigm. So we've been working on some of these. I want to give you, for the first time, a glimpse into what we're working on the security side. And to help me do that, we have Tom Korn. So I can welcome Tom Korn to the stage.
Hey.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great.
So Tom Korn runs security, and we've been working together for
A couple of years now.
2 years now. Super. All right, so I'm super jazzed about this. I really love the work that we're doing. I think it has the potential to really change things. So perhaps tee it up for us?
Sure. So we're starting to work on a whole series of new advanced services for security. And one of the first ones coming out is around network encryption. And it's a great example of all the things that you've been describing. You know, taking something that was once a point product and turning it into a distributed service, or what you sometimes call an infinite service. And it's everywhere. And maybe more importantly, it changes how you implement policy from thinking about it through the physical infrastructure, how you route data, et cetera, to through the lens of the application, which is ultimately what you're trying to protect. And it eventually becomes really a checkbox on an application.
Yeah, no, I love this idea. So basically, the application, an attribute, a fundamental attribute is encryption. So as long as it has that attribute, any packet will be encrypted. So you and I have been in security for a while. It's easy for us to geek out about this, but maybe not obvious to everybody the context which this is. So provide some background?
Sure. Well, look, we live in this hyper-connected world now. And in this world, the perimeter is far too porous. The attack surface is really simply too wide. As a result, we live in a state of compromise. So the challenge in the coming decade is going to be, how do we create trusted services even on physical infrastructure we don't always trust? And in the context of an application becoming a distributed service, that means protecting the confidentiality of the data and integrity of the data as it moves across the network between these components. No eavesdropping. Systems can't pretend to be other systems. And what I get is really what was sent. And encryption is a great way of solving these kinds of problems.
Yeah, that's right. And so now, encryption has been around for a long time. Certainly, I've been using it for decades. I know you have. It's probably also worth going into, like, why hasn't it made its way into the data center? Like, why hasn't this happened yet?
Well, 2 words: root canal. Troubleshooting.
I use that.
It's operationally complex, right? It is a terrible experience dealing with network encryption. And the complexity comes from how you manage keys. It comes from the bottlenecks that you create with dealing with appliances and agents of different kinds. And it breaks visibility for things that legitimately need visibility. Application, of course. Ironically, also a lot of the security controls that you're placing on the network, it often breaks those controls. They have to see the traffic.
That's right.
Yeah.
So massive kind of user management problem, key management problem, distribution problem. You have network virtualization, which is basically a distribution platform. How does that change the game?
Well, I mean, the laws of gravity change. It opens the door to make encryption incredibly simple to deploy, to scale, and to align to ultimately what you're trying to protect. It's built in, processing is distributed. You take advantage of crypto acceleration in sort of Intel chipsets, and suddenly you don't have bottlenecks. You're encrypting and decrypting on the VM boundary at the VNIC level. The application doesn't even know that it's happening under the hood. And here's what's really compelling. We're leveraging the virtual network controller and microsegmentation. That exposes the whole structural context of the application. So now we know these are the pieces that should talk to each other. These are the security services, including from our partners, that need to legitimately see the traffic. So you turn it on, and it just works. It even works site to site. And it's aligned to the application. The application just works. Security just works.
I love it. I mean, I just love this idea. You have a VM. It sends a packet. It hits a VNIC. At that moment, it's encrypted until exactly where it needs to go, unless there's a security service where it becomes visible. So I'm a networking guy. This is a networking talk. We're talking about encryption in flight, but that's not the entire picture.
So there's more work going on, including some work on the encrypting data at rest, particularly the VMDK. And this is also very, very, very compelling. It's the same issue. Protecting data at rest at one point used to be protecting against a hard drive being stolen physically out of a data center. But in this new world, these things are just files. These things are just data. And so it becomes a security imperative and not just a compliance checkbox. Again, the challenges of dealing with point products, with agents, the complexity of managing those things. When you start building this into the virtual fabric, those things start to disappear, right? You can leverage, it becomes a native service, it's guest agnostic, you can encrypt once and run it anywhere, and that becomes ultimately very similar to a distributed service. Very, very compelling stuff. We're excited about it.
Awesome. So you're working on a lot of cool stuff. This is just a sneak peek. You're going to be talking later on today?
Yeah, 1 o'clock today. We have a session in 104 in North, which I'm called Security for the New Battlefield. And anyone who's interested in understanding our vision, strategy, direction, and security, 45 minutes. It's a great place to be.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. All right. So this marks, actually for me, 10 years since I started on this journey. So 10 years ago, I was at Stanford. I was actually working with Mendel Rosenblum, who's one of the founders of VMware. And we were doing a research project that underlied a lot of what became SDN and network virtualization. So it really is meaningful for me to be up here talking to you about all of the progress, all of the adoption, all of the innovation, all of the understanding of the use cases. But I realized that the reason this happened is because of you, the community, and the partner ecosystem. So I really encourage you, as you walk around and you're interacting with your peers, you realize how rare it is to have a community that will adopt this really disruptive stuff and change an industry. So with that, I want to say thank you very much. I'm very humbled to be on this journey with you, and I appreciate it. Enjoy the show.